Good morning. It is September 22nd, and today I want to talk about the niyamas because that's what I want to do on Wednesdays. And I want to talk about contentment or santosha. I've seen different spellings and pronunciations and different literal translations, so we're going to work with what we've got right now, contentment. And this word is very simple, but it gets into a lot of ideas. For example, one accessible way to look at it is to not invest your happiness or your potential happiness in things, in objects. Entropy is constant in the universe. Even stars have lifespans. Everything breaks down. So, in particular, when you own something, like let's say a pair of sandals, or maybe even 4 pairs of sandals, and your dog eats them, there's an idea that the state of disassemblage, right, they're no longer functional, they've been chewed into bits. That state existed at the same time as the state of repair. Like the potential of a thing will occupy a space similar to the thing itself. So don't be upset. Don't spend that energy when they're gone, because you knew when you got them that they would be gone eventually. I think on that note, I handled it really well. I was frustrated. Cassie is trying to will that ball to move with her mind. I was frustrated, sure, because I didn't have sandals anymore, and I wear them like all the time. But Cassie was being Cassie. She was doing exactly what a dog does, especially a puppy. I didn't put them away, and that state of disrepair was going to happen eventually. Whether I wore them out or Cassie chewed them out, that was going to happen. And I think it's interesting because you get into these ideas like cleanliness and contentment and self-reflection and surrender and discipline, and it takes discipline to practice them all the time. It takes discipline to practice any of them at any time. And I want to talk for a second about cleanliness, because this one has been on my radar in a major way lately. And the sun is blazing over there, and it's really great. Taking a shower, no matter how difficult it might be given a state of mind, is easier than maintaining a clean state of mind. Drop it. Drop it. And what do I mean by that? I mean avoiding thoughts that can damage a person's bliss. There are levels to everything, and I've talked before about my mountain, and I'm going to have to do a vlog about my mountain and what that means to me. Again, because it's been a while. I just got out of the shower, and now I'm covered with dog mud. There are levels to anything, and although on one side, on one end, there's the bliss of just sitting here feeling like I'm on my mountain all the time, and the other side would be a very strong, egocentric, self-defeating, toxic view of the world. There are still some levels in there. Simply, well, let's not use the word simply. Avoiding, like, You don't have to walk around blissful all freaking day, like, right? But avoiding negative self digs, avoiding negative self language, avoiding a thing, having practicing tapas or discipline to avoid thoughts that are unclean for your happiness, right? If happiness were a blanket and unclean thoughts were false negativity about self-worth and value, well, then you're going to soil that blanket. You want to avoid that, right? If you started there, and okay, so if you started there, that would be a huge first step in practicing self-love and gratitude and getting onto a road toward this idea of bliss. How do you do that? Right, it's easy for people to come on to YouTube or in any place really and say, hey, here's this bad habit, don't do that thing. Yeah, but how do you not do that thing? Well, it takes us back to neurological connections, the neurological bridges inside our minds that our neurons make, and our brain allocates resources to things that we do. If you wash dishes for your job and someone saw you cranking away, you'd be more efficient and effective at washing dishes than somebody who doesn't wash dishes for their job, because you go in there every day and you wash all these pots and pans and plates and whatnot at a restaurant, and you would just fire right through it, probably without spilling a lot of water, because your brain has had ample time to practice that. Every day you go to work, you practice that, and your brain assigns resources. Oh, this is what we're doing, I'm going to put stuff on it, and we're going to get better at it. That's a natural function of the brain. Now, I don't know, I'm sure there are neurodivergent conditions where people don't have that ability. But typically speaking, that's got to be rare, because without that ability, you cannot function. So if you're functioning in your own day-to-day life, if you're going to work, even if it's sporadic, if you're eating meals, even if it's sporadic, if you're out and about and you're engaging with other people, then chances are you're making neurological bridges. And I'm going to look into that, because I'm curious to see what that is. It's got to be a condition. It's got to be something that's been studied. Anyway, we're talking about how to start practicing not being mean to ourselves. And that's the goal right now. This idea, this blog has turned from a blog about the niyamas into a self-help blog about applying 2 niyamas to day-to-day life. So cleanliness of thought and tapas, which is discipline. By preparing your mind's eye and having the thought, you've already started making the connections. As soon as you think about a thing, you're starting to make the connections. And what can be done is you can learn a behavior, a self-taught behavior, so that any time you recognize a toxic thought about yourself, you can start by saying no in your inner dialogue. It's not me. That's not who I am. You don't have to do that. You can have any variation of that theme, but the idea is to start building those connections in such a way that when you have this negativity bias, right, we're all our own worst enemy. So when it comes to these negative self-expressions, recognizing them as negative and not true, if you've never done that before, that can be a major life-changing step. Cassie dog. Cassie dog. Settle down. No barking at people. They're okay. They live there. There's also a squirrel tormenting her over there. It's terrible. The squirrel's just chilling on a tree. So yeah, to summarize, we're talking about cleanliness of mind and discipline to achieve cleanliness of mind by way of first recognizing negative thoughts as negative thoughts and untrue, and then eventually getting to a point where you have them less and less. Like that's ideal, right? And you can get there through repetition. Your brain will follow your discerning mind's goal. It's no different than if you decided to learn to juggle and you practice juggling 10 minutes every day. Your brain will work on that in the background. It's how your brain works. It's amazing. It's like a superpower. Think to yourself, I want to do X, but I'm just not good at it. No one is when they start. Drummers have to learn to drum. They have to learn rhythm to drum. They don't just know rhythm and then start drumming. And if you say that somebody does, it's not true. They learned rhythm somewhere else. They just learned rhythm tapping on their steering wheel for a long time, and then they're like, I'm going to take up drums. You have to learn stuff. We don't know things. Hey, squirrel. The squirrel is zoomed right in on me. He's zoomed. He has squirrel zoom. Everything that I've done, I've built up. By hook or by crook. Talking and learning. I suppose there's an argument for genetics, but you don't need good genetics, necessarily. Your brain has the capacity to do this, if you would only give it the wherewithal to do this, right? If we don't, if the only thing we do is chew on gristle and spit nails about how terrible we are as human beings, our brains will latch on to that. Our subconscious mind will work on that. The first step out of that kind of behavior is to recognize when it's happening. And then eventually you can start to change that behavior when it's happening. Instead of just recognizing it, you can see it as a falsehood. And yeah, that's not to say we're perfect, right? We screw up. People make mistakes, they make errors, that's fine. But if we're not our emotions, we're also not necessarily our errors, right? We live in a very cause and effect society, our culture. If you make an error big enough, you will be represented by that error for the rest of your life, by our culture's standard. And maybe in some cases that's true. I don't know. But we're not talking about that. We're talking about having a thought about yourself and curbing those thoughts so that they're not always nasty, mean thoughts, as a way to practice cleanliness and discipline, also known as, I cannot pronounce this word at all, Shocha and Santosha. Got to work on my oh wow, it just went out of my head. There you go. Sanskrit. Got to work on my Sanskrit pronunciations. Speaking of which, I really want to learn what upward dog means. Utkatasana, Padagustasana, Chaturanga Dandasana, Supta Baddhakonasana, Savasana, Tadasana. I know a whole bunch of, I know a handful of postures. I don't know them all. So how do I learn them? Well, first of all, I'm not a terrible person for not knowing them. Second of all, I can learn them just by reading them. and my brain will do the rest for me. My brain will allocate those resources. I read them and then screw them up a whole bunch until I get them right. I'm gonna go do my vinyasa practice. I really indulged. I ended up being a little slower this morning than I meant to be, and I'm supposed to be done with this already. And I'm not, and that's alright. That's okay. Thanks for joining me on my practice this morning. Namaste.